What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I've got 12 random tips and just little things that you may not have noticed yet within Warzone. This isn't going to be like a comprehensive guide on how to get wins more effectively. This is just a list that I've been compiling of a bunch of the little things that I didn't really notice at first glance or I didn't know about right away, and that I've found with my playtime, as well as for some of these I've just seen it online with people tweeting about it, or in some cases a Reddit post. But these are just the little things that will all add up to help you have a better understanding of Warzone, and for many of them, they will help your gameplay out pretty significantly. So without further ado, let's just hop right into the list. The first tip that I have for you guys here, and the first thing that you may not know about because I was confused about this at first, when you down a player but you don't finish them off and they end up being revived by their teammates or they end up self-reviving, there's actually a sound effect that plays for you when this happens. And this is what it sounds like. Now for some people you'll already know this, but this is something that wasn't immediately obvious, and I feel like it's a very important tip to share because initially I thought it was like my teammates were activating something, or I don't know what was happening. I didn't understand what that sound effect was, and now that I do, that's a very valuable piece of information for you to have when you're in a fight. If you hear that, that means that person has been revived, so there's one extra threat that you're going to have to worry about. Next up, I've got a couple tips regarding the different contracts that you have access to within the game, and these are those things that you can find on the map. There's one with a flag, that's your recon contracts. Then we've got the one with the little target on it, that's your bounty contracts. And then there's also the scavenger contracts, which has the magnifying glass. So with the recon contracts, what this allows you to do, if you complete that contract, which just requires you to capture an area, that will give you a peek as to where the next circle is going to end up. And that's pretty valuable information if you're trying to get a good setup. Now that part's fairly obvious. The thing that a lot of people don't know is if you complete multiple recon contracts early on in the game, it can show you every single circle that's going to happen all the way until the final circle. If you're just going for pure wins here, this is an excellent tactic to help you just get set up in the perfect position for that final circle so that you're ready to go and take on the other players. Now, this isn't necessarily appealing to the people that want to get really high kill wins because you don't want to take all that time to complete all those recon contracts. But it is something that's very interesting to know. However, one thing to keep in mind, when you are in the process of capturing that zone that you have to capture for the recon contract, it will shoot a flare up in the air directly above where you're at. And this is kind of leading into the next tip that fits in with this same thing. If you see a glowing yellow flare up in the air, this means that there's an enemy player or an enemy squad at that location capturing an area, and therefore if you're looking for kills, that's a great way to find them. Just follow the flares and you'll find people to kill. I should also point out on this same point, when you buy back a teammate, a red flare will shoot up in the air, very similar, but it is a little bit different. And therefore, if you see a red flare up in the air, that means somebody has just bought back a teammate in that location. So flares are very important to pay attention to if you're looking to find some more kills. As for the next tip that I've got for you, which I realize a bunch of people know about this already, but I'm sure there's still plenty of people out there that haven't seen this yet. If you manage to call in 3 UAVs at a time as a team, you will get an advanced UAV that will show the location of every single player on the entire map. Normally when you call one UAV in, you get the dots for people that are within a certain distance of you. I don't know that exact distance offhand at the moment, but it's not really like a super far distance that it will reveal enemy players. Additionally, if the enemies are using a loadout that has Ghost on it, they won't show up with a single UAV. However, if you call in those 3 UAVs at a time, so if everybody on your squad buys a UAV and you all call it in at the same time, that advanced UAV shows absolutely everyone on the map, and anybody that doesn't have Ghost will show up as an arrow, so you'll be able to see them in real time and you'll be able to see the direction that they're facing currently. So this is extremely powerful, especially as you start to get towards the end game situations, because nobody will be able to hide from you if you use this strategy. Moving on to the next tip, this is something that a ton of people still don't know about. In the pre-game lobby where you're able to shoot people and you just keep dropping in and you get like a random loadout, at that point, you gain XP and weapon XP and you level weapons up when you're getting kills on enemy players. So if you're interested in leveling things up and working on things, absolutely you want to get in there and get as many kills as you possibly can before the match starts. I still see a ton of people just kind of AFKing there, just waiting for the actual game to start. not realizing that there's XP to be earned while you do that. This brings us to the next couple tips that I have for you guys that both involve the Gulag. The first one, and I actually saw this on Reddit, and it was kind of a genius idea. When you're waiting to get into your 1v1 and other people are fighting, if you go around and spray paint the other people that are waiting to start, one of those people is likely to be the person that you're going to face up against, and that spray paint will still be visible in your 1v1 match. And as we know, the Gulag can be a little bit dark sometimes and kind of hard to see people. Like, they don't really pop a lot. So if you spray paint somebody really bright yellow or really bright red, you will actually be able to see that in your 1v1. Now, that's a relatively minor thing. I don't know how often that's actually going to change the outcome of your 1v1. But it's just one of those little things that gives you a slight edge over the competition. Additionally, within the Gulag, a lot of people have been wondering how people are healing up after taking damage within the Gulag. And this is actually quite simple. They implemented a mechanic where when that middle flag appears that you can capture to win if there's a stalemate and nobody's killing each other, the moment you touch that flag for the first time, it will fully heal your character. So if you find yourself at a bit of a disadvantage and you're towards middle map and you've taken some damage but the enemy hasn't, all you have to do is touch that flag, you're back to full health, and then you're back in the fight. And this can often really throw your enemy off as well, because they know that they put damage into you, and then suddenly you're back to full health. It can absolutely make the difference in that 1v1. Next up, I have a tip for you guys regarding loadout crates. A lot of people really like using overkill within Warzone for good reason, because you get two fully decked out weapons with the exact attachments that you want on them. And sniper rifles are extremely powerful in this mode, so most people want to have a sniper rifle, and then also a solid secondary weapon like an assault rifle, an SMG, or maybe even a shotgun. Now that's great having those two weapons, however, you have to sacrifice your second tier perk, which is a pretty powerful perk slot, especially because Ghost is in there, which is quite powerful, and also High Alert, I've been hearing at least, is very, very good in Warzone. I don't really like the idea of it myself. I think it would just make me way too paranoid and way too stressed out, but I know a lot of people are really, really liking that. So something you can do, if you and your squad happen to have a good amount of cash, is you can buy a second loadout drop after you've already selected your loadout drop with your overkill perk on it, so you get your two weapons. Once you get a second loadout drop, you can select a different class setup that has a better set of perks, like Ghost, for instance. And then when you select that, the guns that you got from your previous loadout drop will just drop on the ground, so you can just pick them back up. And now you can have your perfect sniper and your perfect assault rifle or SMG or whatever, while also using one of the other tier 2 perks that's not overkill. Now, yes, that does cost a lot of money, but there are even situations where you might just happen to stumble across a second loadout crate that's just laying in the middle of the map. That happens fairly often as you start to approach later in the game. So even in those situations, it won't cost you anything extra. You can swap to a class that has Ghost and keep the same guns. Now, I do want to be clear here. A lot of people have been asking, and I did go and test this to be absolutely certain. When you get your second loadout, your perks from the previous loadout do not carry over. So you will be replacing all of the perks from the previous loadout, so you can't just stack up on a bunch of different perks. Now, moving on to the next tip that I have for you guys, which I'm sure a lot of people by now have realized, but for people that don't typically like jumping on things and trying to mantle up to various areas, the threshold for mantling on surfaces has been increased significantly for Warzone compared to multiplayer. And what this means is you can jump up onto walls or up onto surfaces that are much higher than you can in multiplayer, and therefore, it's always worth a shot. Sometimes you might think like, oh, there's no way I can get over that wall, I have to go all the way around, when in reality, you can actually just jump and mantle on top of it quite easily. Additionally, I found there's a bunch of spots on the sections that are ground war maps within Warzone, where if you tried to make that particular jump or that mantle in ground war, it would never work for you. But within Warzone, it absolutely does. This is great to know if you ever want to try and get creative and flank somebody that might be camping in a position and they don't realize that you have an alternate method for getting to them. And I've taken plenty of people off guard by just being creative in this way. Going off of that same point, you probably already noticed this part. The fall damage is so much more forgiving in Warzone compared to regular multiplayer. In regular multiplayer, you have to be extremely careful dropping off even relatively low surfaces because you can die quite easily, whereas in Warzone, you can jump from roughly 3 stories without taking any damage whatsoever, without even having to open your parachute. Now, anything more than 3 stories is really starting to push it, so I wouldn't push it in those situations, but for many of the buildings in the game that aren't high-rises, you can drop off of them without opening your parachute and without taking any fall damage. Now, we're almost through the list, but I've got a couple more little ones here to share with you guys. One little bit of information I wanted to point out, which again, this one might be obvious to a bunch of people, but I know there's still plenty of people out there that haven't really paid much attention to this. When you kill an enemy player, pay very close attention to the yellow words that pop up in the middle of the screen. The main thing you want to be looking for here is if it says team wipe, that means that guy's entire team has been eliminated and they aren't a threat to you anymore. At first, I wasn't really paying too much attention to this, and I would kill a player and then finish him off. And then after that, I'm still thinking, where are his other two teammates? And I'd be searching around for them, being all cautious, not realizing that it popped up and said team wiped when I finished off my kill. So as obvious as that might seem to some people, I do feel it's extremely important to bring up in this video because that's a very valuable piece of information that you should definitely try to be aware of when you're getting your kills. Now finally, one last tip that I have for you guys that I just don't see enough people taking advantage of is if you see a Claymore or a Bouncing Betty available for you to pick up, but you want to use a different lethal, let's just say you have like a Molotov and you want to stick with the Molotov, it's still a great idea, assuming you have the time, to pick up that Claymore or that Bouncing Betty, place it on the ground really quickly, and then pick your Molotov back up and be on your way. That Claymore or Bouncing Betty will stay active, and therefore, you never know. You might just end up with a random kill minutes after you had placed that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten. Or at the very least, if you just recently left that area where you dropped that Bouncing Betty or that Claymore, if you get a hit marker with that, now you know there's a squad that's following in your footsteps. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for just a bunch of little random facts and tips that I have for you guys that many of you wouldn't have known. If you put all of these little tips and pieces of information together, it's not like they're necessarily going to impact the outcome of every single game you play, but they absolutely should be helping you as you're playing through Warzone. Of course, though, that's just my list. I'd like to know in the comment section below, are there any other little tips that you feel that other people wouldn't be aware of within Warzone that you'd like to share? If you have any, just leave them in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.